Gender and abortion. Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Pursuit, a Crosspoint City Church podcast that pursues a deeper dive into the scripture from last week's sermon. I'm Brad Chandler, and I am here with our lead pastor, James Griffin. Good to see you, man.
My good friend.
It's always good to be together.
It is, man. Always. We were just talking about how we were together on Friday fishing, and
We don't need to talk about that.
I outfished you.
That's why we don't need to talk about it, because you outfished me. I caught all of one fish.
Come on, man.
Which is,
It's
sad.
all good. Hey,
It was beautiful weather, but
it was great. Yep. But
not
hey,
fun
the
to
only
catch
thing
one.
worse than catching one is catching zero.
that's true.
So at
I
least you got a
didn't get
fish in the boat.
skunked.
You did not get skunked, but it was still a good day. There are worse ways to spend a beautiful Friday.
That's true. It was good to be on the lake. I hate that I
was.
didn't catch as many fish as you, but congrats.
Appreciate you.
I owe you lunch.
I'll take it.
But we've got some exciting stuff coming up around all the hymns, specifically when it comes to men's
Yes,
discipleship.
we
You want to
do.
say anything about that?
Yeah. Well, this weekend we had the big open house for the Compassion Center.
Mhm.
So a lot of our people got to walk through and they got to see firsthand the impacts of their generosity. We're serving women being rescued out of sex trafficking, teaching adult literacy, mentoring kids. We're providing biblical counseling services to the community,
Mhm.
providing medical care to underinsured and uninsured families. And so all of that was open. The building was open. Our mobile medical clinic was open. Super cool just to see tons of people walk through that.
Yeah.
And my daughters came home from church yesterday talking about how they got to walk through it and to see it. And so if you missed open house, I don't know what to tell you. You got to come back and see it a different time. But thanks for helping to fund the mission of Crosspoint. But the next big thing coming up for All to Him, and you referenced men's discipleship, is our men's conference. We're calling it the Act Like Men Conference. It's coming up Father's Day weekend, June 14th and June 15th.
Yeah, man.
And we've been doing pre-registration with our guys that are already a part of our men's discipleship.
How many we got signed up?
I heard the latest was like 330 something. Okay.
Yep.
And this is pre-registration.
Yeah.
We've only opened it up to guys so far
Yeah.
who have been walking with us over the last 10 weeks as part of our men's discipleship efforts. So this upcoming weekend, we're opening registration up. We're making it public.
Mhm.
We only have 900 seats this year. And I am believing that all of them are going to go very quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this podcast, you're part of our church, or you're anywhere in the general Northwest Georgia area and you want to be a part, be on the lookout. This upcoming weekend, registration will be live. It'll be open. I mean, dude, it's going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, it's exciting, man. I can't wait to see
I
how
know.
God's going to use this
I know.
conference.
I know. I mean, beyond all the cool stuff that we have to do
Mhm.
and all the giveaways and stuff like that, all that's great. But man, it's going to be incredible worship. We're bringing in some great communicators. Clayton King's coming Friday night.
Mhm.
We've got Jace Robertson coming in Saturday morning.
Mhm.
Duck Dynasty, Jace Robertson, which is going to be great.
Quack, quack, baby.
That's exactly right. And then at the very end, guys got to
heavy
settle.
hitters.
Guys
Heavy
gotta-
hitters at the
Guys got
end.
to settle for me.
That's right.
So anyway,
Now, that's the heavy hitter,
but
man. Come on.
I love that. Well, I'm just honored to be a part. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. So again, if you are a man in this area, sign up.
Yeah.
If you're a woman and you're looking for a great Father's Day gift to buy a husband, a brother, a friend, whatever,
A
just
dad,
get him a ticket.
Send them.
Get him a ticket to the conference. We'd love to see him. Yep.
Yeah. It's going to be a good weekend. Cannot wait to see how God's going to use that.
Yeah.
And we have just got God doing all kinds of stuff in and around our church.
Yeah.
And it feels like a huge part of that is this brand new series we just kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told you this, but I mean, I really feel like this series is going to be one that marks our church and marks our people as we walk through this together.
Yep.
And have just really appreciated like you feeling and sensing just God leading us to need to talk through some of these things that we're talking through over the next 4 weeks. And so kicked it off yesterday, this past week,
Right.
with week 1 of Under God, the new series that will walk through different aspects of really society and the world in which we live in. And so last week focused on the individual. And as we talked about the individual, we also talked about worldviews and belief systems, specifically Christianity and humanism were two of the things that you really dug into last week. So can you just kind of recap that a little bit just so we can frame the conversation as we keep talking about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I will say this as well. if you missed the sermon from this past weekend, go watch it, get caught up. I don't have time to repreach all that on the podcast. Okay. So we're going to hopefully take the conversation a step further today and talk about some things that I did not talk about, but I need you to go listen to it.
Yeah.
Watch it, find it on the website, on the Crosspoint City Church app, whatever, but go check it out.
YouTube. Yeah.
I pray it's really helpful. But yeah, one of the things that I did is I gave a brief comparison of the Christian worldview and the humanistic worldview, which is the dominant worldview in the United States today. And so I really just talked about 6 categories, okay? And when you hear these, what you notice right away is that they oppose one another at every point. So these worldviews are completely at odds.
Yeah.
So I'll just walk back through this quickly, okay? According to Christianity, we believe that God is sovereign. Humanism believes that man is sovereign. So Christianity would say God's in control. The humanistic worldview would say, no, man is in control.
Yeah.
When it comes to truth, Christianity believes that truth is revealed to man by God. Humanism would say that truth is determined by man through reason. So that if we want to know what truth is, we don't need to look to God's revelation, which we would call his word, but we just put our brains to the task and we come together.
Just think about it hard enough.
That's it.
Yep.
And we decide, right? And the interesting thing about humanism is that, Brad, you can have your truth and I can have my truth. And our truths, they don't have to align and we can be totally free to live our truths out as long as they don't hurt other people. So within the humanistic worldview, truth is a very subjective thing, okay? Number 3, Christianity believes that people flourish when we live according to God's truth. Humanism believes that people flourish when they live according to their truth. And so as Christians, this is where we would say, God did not make us to be autonomous creatures. The whole idea of autonomy is that we are a law unto ourselves. This is what the word means. It means self-law. And as Christians, we believe that God made us to be dependent creatures. And so that we're in the world not to do what we want to do. We're in the world to do what God wants us to do. And that when we do life God's way, that is when we flourish as people, all right? So completely different.
Yeah.
Number 4, Christianity believes that man is saved by grace through faith in God. Humanism would believe that man is saved through works by faith in himself. And so as I said over the weekend, where we all agree is that the world is jacked, things are broken, somebody needs to do something, but humanism believes like we can do it. We can fix our lives and we can fix our world and we just need to apply ourselves, right? We need to work together, remove differences and inequalities and redistribute things like power and wealth and deal with the problem of oppression and leverage science and leverage technology. And if we work hard enough and exercise enough faith in ourselves, we can create this heaven on earth, and we don't need God's help to do it.
Yeah,
so
we can create utopia.
That's right.
Yeah.
A couple more. Number 5, Christians believe that in the end, man is accountable to God because we've been created by God, and creation implies ownership. God created us in his image, in the Imago Dei. We belong to him. And the world belongs to him. And so what that means is that we can't do whatever we want while we're here, but that ultimately we are accountable to our Creator. And in the end, we will stand before him and we will give an account for how we spent the one life that he gave us, okay? Humanism, on the other hand, believes that man is accountable to no one. That as long as his truth does not hurt another person, he is free to live his life how he wants to live his life. And in the end, he answers to no one for how he's lived. Radically different, okay? And then the final point, number 6, and this concerns government. We're going to talk a lot about this in week 4 of the series. But as Christians, we believe that civil government is God's servant. Romans 13:4, Paul says it, that God instituted civil government as his diakonos, his deacon or his minister. So according to the Christian worldview, we would say that civil government exists to first serve God by not only praising good, but punishing evil, all right? And so it's his servant. Humanism would say civil government is man's servant, and that civil government exists by the people, for the people, that it is in place to protect the rights and truths and freedoms of human beings as they have determined them to be. So again, what I tried to show our church is that you can't synthesize the two worldviews, okay?
Yeah.
That it is completely impossible to bring Christianity and humanism together, which is why, as followers of Jesus, we feel this great tension as we live in the world today, you know? It's like, so let me just encourage somebody. If you feel like you've gone crazy, you haven't gone crazy, okay? If you look at the world and you're like, is something wrong with me? The only thing that's wrong with you is that you see the world very differently than the society in which you live. As Christians, we believe, again, God is in control. He's in charge. He determines truth. People flourish when they live according to his truth. And society believes the exact opposite on every point.
Yeah.
And so I hope that helps in framing the conversation that we're about to have.
No, I think it helps a ton. And even in some of those distinctions and looking at the two different viewpoints, it feels like there's different versions of freedom when you start talking about freedom, like the ability to, and even flourishing, right?
Yep.
And you start defining what does that mean? Isn't that for me to just be able to do whatever I want? And
right.
to be able to determine my own destiny and my own, like, I am ultimately king and I am ultimately in charge. So isn't that what like true flourishing is, and to truly be free? And it really feels like that's a huge part of why it's such at odds, because I mean, where has the world's version of freedom led?
Yep.
And where does it lead?
Correct.
And that kind of leads to my next question is like, how much, and do you think the humanistic viewpoint is playing a role in what we are seeing so much of in society today, right? I mean, we're seeing increases in depression and anxiety and suicide rates. Like all of it is going to all-time highs ever in human history that we're aware of. And
that's right.
It kind of begs that question, like, is this humanistic viewpoint that we're seeing so much of playing a factor in that?
100%. I would say that it is directly related, because to your point, what we would say about freedom and flourishing is exactly the opposite of what society would say. You know, society would say that freedom is you and I doing whatever it is we want to do. And we would say that true freedom is us living according to our God-given natures. That true freedom is us doing life as God has designed us to do life. And when we do that, this is when we flourish. That human flourishing is about human beings conforming to creation. And what I would argue is that when human beings refuse to do that, these are the consequences, the things that we're seeing in society today. So I'll just say it like this, okay? When a human being assumes that he does not belong to a creator and that he is on his own, what that means is that he is walking through life completely detached from anything greater or bigger than him. And that he's grasping for purpose, he's grasping for meaning, because there's no being outside of him that has instilled purpose and meaning in him, intrinsically put that into him. When a person walks through life believing that they're in control, that they're calling the shots, that they're in charge, what that means is that they're ultimately responsible for fixing themselves, navigating their way through life, making right decisions on a daily basis as best they can determine what right and wrong or best might be.
It's a lot of pressure, man.
It's a lot of pressure. All in hopes that, like, okay, hopefully this goes well. You know, I'm the one in control, and it's all up to me to determine truth and to figure it out, and hopefully I can make my life work. And then what's crazy too about a society like ours is that we as people have become, and I'm making a stereotypical blanket statement here, we as people have become dependent upon government as a savior type, if you will. Like a lot of people in our society view government as both sovereign and savior. And the viewpoint is, well, we need people in positions of power to protect truth, protect rights, to protect freedoms. We need people in the medical field and the fields of technology and science to leverage these things to serve us, to better our lives. And what that means is that we're like putting all of our hopes in the hands of fallible people, right? And people who can blow it and people who can get it wrong. To your point, it's a lot of pressure, man. And I think when you really think long and hard about that, the results are fear. Okay, because if you're in control of your life and it's up to you, well, what if you get it wrong, man?
Yeah.
So you're always in this constant state of worry and anxiety. If you think about the fact that you're on your own, no life, no purpose, like you're always unsure and insecure about flourishing and freedom. And I just think, again, there's a lot of sadness and hopelessness associated with that. If you're always looking to other people to save you, I mean, come on, man, we all can look around and go, all right, a lot of these people in positions of power, they're not always doing the best job. And the things that they promise all aren't always coming to fruition. Like we got a lot of people in positions of power today that are promising us the world, and that if we trust in them and believe in them and vote for them, that they'll fix things and they'll turn things around. And here we are, and the world's still jacked and the world's still broken, and we're trying the same things over and over and over and over again. And so again, I think that leaves us in a very hopeless state. I was reading a book recently too, to take it one step further. And in this book, the guy was talking about transhumanism, just the idea of leveraging science and technology to prolong life and to hopefully maybe one day in the future, even save human beings from death. Yet here we are still dying, you know. It's like we can't stop aging and we can't stop death from one day overtaking us. And so again, man, when you look at all of this, what's the natural result? If the humanistic worldview is true, you're going to be afraid and you're going to be anxious and you're going to feel hopeless and you're going to wonder what the purpose and the meaning of life is, because you're just kind of here on your own and there's nothing bigger than you or greater than you. So to go back to your question, I think this worldview is what is fueling what is happening in our society today.
Yeah.
And as I said over the weekend, I believe it's also very, very spiritual in nature. I believe this is a demonic ideology.
Yeah.
That Satan himself is pushing upon our society. And the reason I say it's a demonic ideology is because it removes God from all of life and it puts man at the center of all things. And anytime man is at the center of all things, things are going to go bad. And the result is going to be the things that we're talking about. So there's a lot at stake here when we think through this.
Yeah, for sure. And all that makes sense. In that last comment you made just about this being kind of demonic in nature makes total sense because of who we know the devil to be. Satan is the great deceiver.
That's right.
So if he can get us tricked into thinking that we're in charge and this is all about us and this is about us making the right decisions for us and not needing to listen to anyone else, and there's no one higher, there's no one greater, well, then he's won and he's done what he was hoping to do in the first place.
Right.
And that ultimately leads to stealing, killing, and destroying because we no longer get to experience life anymore. And in addition to pressure, it feels like it's just, if there's nothing bigger, if there's no one bigger, right? It's all of the weight of life is now on you. It's on me. It's on any of us if that's what we're coming at life with. And that's the perspective we have. Correct. Which makes even more sense when you start unpacking statements that Jesus makes about, hey, my burden's easy. Right. And it's light. Like it's because he takes the burden of life. He's the one who gives life. And so this kind of worldview of it's all about me, it makes total sense that it breaks down and it ultimately leads to destruction, but it also leads to all these things we're talking about.
Right. Well, and to your point, it is Satan's message to humanity. And it's the lie that you see in the garden that resulted in sin entering the world, where Satan told Adam and Eve, be autonomous. Be autonomous. God is not for you. He cannot be trusted. He is holding out on you. You deserve to be like him. The temptation was not a piece of fruit, all right? The temptation was autonomy. God does not need to be in charge. You need to be in charge. If you do things your way, life will work better than if you do it God's way. And this is still the temptation he puts before people today. And what it sounds like in a society like ours is what I just described. It sounds like this worldview that has overtaken the United States and has corrupted the way that people think about the world. And again, it is a worldview that puts man at the center of all things. And when man is at the center of all things, things fall apart.
The fruit is not good.
No, it's not.
Do not eat the fruit.
It's not.
Well, I mean, as we unpack this, and you specifically were teaching through this, you dug into two really specific issues that are really challenging in our world today that we see and continue to see more and more of as we go along through human history currently in its state right now.
Right.
And those issues were abortion and gender.
Yep.
And so you went into pretty good detail and were able to unpack those in a great way through the sermon. So to your point earlier, go back and listen if you haven't heard that or seen that. But thought we could maybe dig into it a little bit more and get even more specific with some of those things and some questions maybe wrapped up in those things. So when it comes to abortion, one of the most common questions that get asked when this issue comes up is about rape, it's about incest, and what about the life of the mother? So those specific things, like how would you wrestle through some of those specific instances when it comes to the area of abortion?
Yeah, very, very, very common and important questions.
Yeah.
And before I start answering, I'll just give a couple general thoughts, okay? When we talk about rape, incest, and life of the mother, we are talking about a very, very small percentage of abortion cases, okay?
Mm-hmm.
When you read the latest research and data, what you find is that cases like these make up less than 2% of all abortions, less than 2%. So think about that, 98+% of abortions are happening at will, I would argue, for probably the sake of convenience, right? And so we're talking about a very, very small percentage of cases here. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So the conversation, again, that we had over the weekend in the sermon, 98% is the number that we probably need to keep in mind when we talk about abortion in more of a general way.
Which is why you didn't dig into it in the actual teaching.
That is absolutely correct.
It's a very small percentage of people that would be dealing with
that. That is correct. Yeah. And then what I would say about rape and incest in general is that these are horrific things. I mean, they're terrible. And as Christian people, we are opposed to them. And the reason that we can make statements like this is horrible, this shouldn't happen. The only reason we can make statements like this is because of the Christian worldview. And I would say that people who don't hold to the Christian worldview, who make statements like this, are actually stealing from our worldview. Because we as Christians are the people who believe that every human being has been made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And because people have been made in the image of God, that every life matters, that every life possesses intrinsic dignity, value, and worth, and that people should be treated accordingly. We also believe that because God created all people are his. We talked about this as well, how creation implies ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that we can't just treat people however we want to treat people is because people are owned by God. And you can't just go messing up something that somebody else owns. And so when you know that human beings are owned by God, it changes the way that you treat human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so to make a statement like rape is wrong, well, the Christian worldview has a foundation upon which we can build that argument in a logical sense, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't hold to a worldview like that, you're stealing from us.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you would just go, no, man's at the center of all things and the humanistic worldview is the right worldview. And well, how do you make a statement like that logically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, man has determined rape to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, at some point the logic runs out.
Yeah.
And you're borrowing from us because what you're saying is that life matters
Mm-hmm.
and that people deserve to be treated with dignity, value, and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the Christian worldview would say because people are image bearers and because they have been created by God and they belong to him. And so I say that to help frame the answer, okay? Would we think about something like rape? What rape is, by its very definition, is it is someone violating the body of an innocent person. So again, this is one of the things we believe as Christians. We believe in liberty and freedom and bodily autonomy. It is not okay to attack or to abuse or to assault another human being, right? And so rape is the violation of the body of another human being, of an innocent human being. Now, here's what I would say about abortion. You could say the same to be true about abortion, that abortion is the violation of the body of an innocent human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so isn't it interesting then that the same person who would argue for the abortion of the baby that is in the womb because of rape, that the person is arguing that we should do to the baby what they are against as it concerns rape.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a logical inconsistency there, okay? And so we need to see that and understand that. But what I would say to answer your question, Brad, and I know this is hard for some people to get their hands and their minds around, is I would say that we should not punish the unborn child for the crime of its father.
Mm-hmm.
Rape is horrible. It's wrong. It should never happen. And according to the law of God as recorded in the Old Testament, I mean, God takes rape so seriously that he says the rapist should suffer capital punishment because of his crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're trying to figure out who to put to death under the Old Testament law, God takes this so seriously that he says it is the rapist who should be put to death for his violation of a fellow image bearer.
Mm-hmm.
And so my argument would be, yes, rape is wrong and it should be punished. There should be severe consequences for the person who does this to another person.
Yeah.
But I do not believe that the right answer is to put the unborn child to death in the womb because of the crime of the father.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't violate the body of an innocent human being because someone else violated the body of an innocent human being, okay? And
two wrongs don't make a right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, and there are examples today of people who were born as a result of rape.
Oh, yeah.
Who I would say are very, very grateful that someone did not punish them for the crime of their father. And so, again, we have to see all life as valuable. And we have to see every life as possessing intrinsic dignity and value and worth.
Yeah.
And so how do we handle that as it concerns rape? That would be my short answer, okay? I would say that the same applies for incest. I do not think that we should kill the unborn child because a family member violated a family member, okay? Incest is obviously wrong. And in this week's sermon, I'm going to talk about the family and God's design for the family. There are all sorts of actions that the Bible condemns that contradict what it means to be family, and incest is one of them, okay? God clearly says in his law, do not do this. It is not right. It is condemned. It is wrong for family members to engage with family members in sexual ways like this. But again, to violate the body of an innocent human being in the womb because someone else did something and they committed a crime or they did something unlawful or they did something immoral, I would argue that's not the right answer, that we are punishing the wrong person at this point. And I would say that the unborn child in the womb absolutely deserves a chance at life. And we should not end the life because the father did something that is not approved of by us or by God, okay?
Yeah.
So do you want to add anything before I talk about life of the mother?
I just think all of that is really consistent. And you spoke to this a little while ago as far as all of that is consistent with what we talked about from the teaching this past week.
Yeah.
It's carrying through that same logic and the same idea of if life begins at conception, as soon as that happens, it is a life that is no longer owned by anyone other than God. So regardless of the situation that created that life, that led to that life coming into existence, God's the author of it.
That's right.
So if he's the author of it, he's in charge of it. No one else is. So no one would be then responsible for ending that life other than him.
Yeah.
So again, like regardless of the circumstance, as horrible as it might be, and not to justify any of those things or to say any of those things aren't wrong, doesn't make the existence of that living being now inherently wrong.
That's right.
Because they were authored by something other than people. It was God who authored them. No, man, I think that's really strong and really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and this too is where I would say we just have to be aware that these are the questions that are brought on by sin. That sin does impact society and it does impact life. And when people act in sinful ways and they commit crimes against other image bearers, there are complexities that are brought on by that person's sin that we as people now have to deal with. But consequence and punishment for sin, we have to understand how to best carry that out. And if we really, as a society, care about justice, then we should not punish innocent people. We should punish criminals. And again, to the point that I've already made, the unborn baby in the womb is an innocent person who should not be punished for the crime of his father, okay? So let me talk about life of the mother, all right?
Okay.
Again, this is really big. It's important. People ask about this all the time. But the first thing that I would say we have to keep in mind, these cases are incredibly, incredibly rare in our society today. Okay. In the United States of America, praise God for the advancements that we've experienced in the way of medicine, technology.
That's what I was about to say, man. We've made so many advancements. This is such a rare thing
it's
now.
It is. It is
praise God.
It is a very, very rare. So if you think about the 2% of cases that we were talking about earlier, the life of the mother thing is like, I mean, it's minuscule. It's so small. I was thinking back to when my wife Amber was pregnant with our baby girl Arden, and we got to experience some of what I'm talking about. You know, with our middle daughter, Selah, my wife had a complete uterine rupture. And so we knew walking into pregnancy number 3, it was going to be very touch and go. We were going to have to monitor things very closely. And so she had to see a specialist throughout the pregnancy. Well, the first specialist that we saw told my wife that it would be in her best interest to abort our baby girl. And I was just glad I wasn't there in the room that day, Brad, because I don't know what I would have done. You know, it's like, you might have been reading about me on the news. Pastor James fights a doctor. I don't know, but
I'll be talking to somebody else right
that's
now.
exactly right. But we fired that guy immediately, and we found a new doctor who actually took his job seriously. You know, the preservation of life. This is what doctors do. And he's like, oh, no, man. We'll use all the resources at our disposal to make sure you get through this pregnancy just fine. And that's exactly what they did. And it was so crazy, man. Like my wife would go in, and they would use certain tools and resources and technological resources to go in and to measure the scar on her uterus to see how thick it was as the baby grew and as the pregnancy progressed, just to like monitor safety and things like that. So again, to the point I'm making, we have things available to us in our society today that keeps cases like this at bay. Life of the mother, right? So very, very, very rare. But I heard a pastor phrase it like this, and I thought this was really helpful language, okay? So I'm stealing from him. He said that in the rare cases where the life of the mother is truly in danger, that this becomes a rescue mission. This becomes a rescue mission. There's a difference between trying to preserve a life and ending a life, all right? And so when we think about life of the mother, we can't think in the category of abortion, I would say. What we have to learn to think about is, okay, what we're trying to do is to preserve the life of mom. The goal would be to preserve both lives, both lives, if that's possible. Like the goal would be to save the life of the mother and to save the life of the baby. But I would say, and this is the Christian view on this issue, that if we have to preserve a life and in the process of preserving the life, a life is lost, that is incredibly sad. It is incredibly unfortunate. But what we cannot do is classify that as abortion, okay? It is a rescue mission. So I was thinking about a young couple in our church. The wife is on our staff. She was sharing a story with us recently that she had an ectopic pregnancy at one point. She was pregnant, didn't progress in the way that it was supposed to. Her life was in danger. She went to the doctor. A medical procedure was performed. And this was not an abortion she didn't go like, I need to have an abortion, right? A medical procedure was performed to preserve her life. And very sadly, as a result of the medical procedure, the pregnancy was terminated. That's not an abortion, okay? It is a rescue mission. And so I think that we have to frame this a bit differently, all right? But again, as Christians, we would say, if in the event of trying to save the mother's life, the life of the child is lost, We should grieve that. We should mourn over that. That was an image bearer that passed. But at the same time, that's very different from someone going into a doctor's office and surgically removing a baby from the womb or taking a pill to discard the baby from the womb. So categorically, I would argue very, very different things.
Yeah. And that's so, it can sound like we're arguing semantics, but it's very much a difference in posture of heart,
100%,
and motivation, and in reasoning behind why you're doing what you're doing.
It is.
And what your goal is, because one's goal is life, another goal is death.
Right.
And so totally agree with you, man.
Well,
and as hard as that situation would be, man.
That's terrible. Well, one illustration that I heard a guy use was, imagine two people are caught up in an ocean or a river, and you dive in to try to save them, and you only have time to save one. What you're trying to do is to preserve life.
Yeah.
It's not that you're just discarding the other life or throwing the other life away.
Yeah.
But in an effort to preserve a life was lost.
Sure.
So you were doing the best that you could, right? Because saving life was the goal.
Yeah.
And I think, categorizing
no one would
this
look
issue
at
in our
you and
minds
say,
is that,
hey, you just killed someone.
That's correct.
They'd say, no, you saved someone.
That is correct. That is correct. So this is about valuing life, not devaluing life.
Yeah.
So I think categorically, again, we've got to think about that topic differently than other forms of abortion.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yep.
So as we talk about just the topic of abortion, and I know we're talking about very small number of cases that would apply to some of the ones we just talked about.
Right.
But just in general,
Yeah.
you start to talk about abortion, it is such a heavy topic, and it has affected so many different people on so many different levels. What would you say to someone who's listening and has either dealt with an abortion themselves, or they've been affected by an abortion in some way, or they've had to wrestle through that decision, or maybe are currently wrestling through that decision right now? What would you say to them?
Yep. Well, I would say what I often say, and there are people in our church. I was talking to people just yesterday who have the story, have been impacted by people's stories, have people in their families, and this is the story. And I would say what I always say, number one, that God has grace for you, that you cannot out-sin the grace of God. And so even if you have made a decision like this, God has grace for you. God can and will forgive you if you will repent and turn in faith to him. And I would say that as a church, we love you and we're here to serve. One of our partners, Bartow Family Resources, which is a great organization here locally, that serves moms and dads and families, and they fight for the lives of unborn children. One of our partners in that fight, they have a support group for people who have had abortions. And I said over the weekend, man, if you need support like that, we have resources. So that's one of the resources that we have. If that's something that you need as you try to navigate healing, please let us know. We want to support you in that. And then I would say to the person that's thinking about it, don't do it. Please, whatever you do, don't do it. We will take your baby. That's what I said over the weekend. Seriously, I don't ever want us to be a church just getting on platforms and making statements. I want us to be a church serving people. And so I would say to the person who's listening, who is contemplating an abortion, if serving you means that we take your baby, we have people in our church that will take your baby right now. And so instead of ending the life of your baby, give your baby life and give it to a family who will love that child and raise it. And so if that is something that you need, please reach out and let us know. We will serve you any way we can.
Yeah. Amen to all those things. Well, the other topic was gender. And so when we start to talk about gender and you start to think about gender and you hear conversations about this, there's a lot of times the question of, okay, well, if someone's wrestling with this and they just feel like they're a different gender than they were biologically born, what's it to you if they just want to be that gender? Like, it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt anyone else. Why can't they just be that gender? Why should this be an issue? Why is this something we should talk about? And why is it something that God even speaks to in Scripture?
Well, again, and I think all these are such huge questions, man, that we need answers to. I think when you consider, again, the humanistic worldview, that it's a very humanistic question, the question of
it's already framed in a certain way.
That's right. Like, why do you care, man?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you care? If somebody wants to, if that's their truth
Mm-hmm.
and they want to live that out, and if they feel that they are a certain gender, why do you care if they're not hurting anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would answer that question in a few ways, okay? Number one, I would say God is someone else. And when it comes to issues like these, I do think that we need to stop and ask the question, does this hurt God? And does this offend God? Does this dishonor God? Does this honor God? Because again, God is creator of all things. And because he is the creator of human beings, he's the owner of human beings. We belong to him. And one day we will be accountable to him. And as we see in Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God created them both male and female.
Mm-hmm.
So this again is the Christian worldview on gender, that we believe gender and biological sex are directly related, that both are fixed realities. They cannot be changed, and it is God who decides.
Mm-hmm.
And then when God creates a biological man, his intention is for the man to live as a man. And when God creates a biological woman, his intention is to live as a woman. And that when men and women live according to their natures, this is when they serve their image-bearing purpose. Like, one of the things that we as human beings are here on planet Earth to do is to represent God. That he has put us here as his physical representatives, to put his glory and his authority on display. And as Christians, we believe that happens when we conform to creation.
Mm-hmm.
When we live according to our natures. It's not that we live however we want to live as autonomous creatures, and this is when we represent him.
Yeah.
No, it's that we live as God has created us to live, as dependent creatures, and we live according to the law of God. And so, again, what that means is that we live as the people God has created us to be. So I would say we have to take him into consideration. Are we hurting him?
Yeah.
Secondly, I would say to the person struggling with gender, you are someone. You're someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it is worth you asking the question, am I hurting me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the interesting thing about gender dysphoria is that historically it has always been classified as a mental health disorder, as a mental illness. You know, I've got an undergraduate in psychology. Brad, I can remember 20 years ago, University of West Georgia, working on my psychology degree. I took a class called Abnormal Psychology.
Mm-hmm.
That was the class title, Abnormal Psychology.
Yeah.
And in my Abnormal Psychology class, we studied gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
I have often wondered if today gender dysphoria is still a part of the Abnormal Psychology class.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a society, I don't know that we classify this as abnormal any longer. I think we tried to argue that this is just a normal way of thinking or living. But again, historically, gender dysphoria, the struggle, has been classified as a mental illness. And the lie of humanism is this, that if you indulge that, you will flourish. That if you feel that you were born into the wrong body, and that if you will live as the gender you feel that you are, then you will be free and you will flourish and you will know the satisfaction and the joy that you are currently missing. And here's just what I want to say. And I say this because I care about people, okay? The truth is you won't. You won't, okay? And again, this is where we're coming from as Christians. What I believe and what we believe is that all you're going to do is hurt yourself, okay? Because number one, if you try to embrace a life that God has not created you to live, you will miss out on knowing life and knowing true freedom and knowing flourishing. In addition, you could do irreparable damage to your physical body. I mean, I was listening to some stories of people who had detransitioned in the week leading up to preparing this sermon.
Yeah.
I was just listening to interviews and reading some statements about people who, you know, early teenage years had transitioned and, you know, biological woman becoming a male, vice versa. And then a little bit later on in life decided, oh my gosh, I made a terrible mistake.
Right.
This is not who I'm supposed to be. And they detransitioned and went back. And I was listening to their stories of just the pain and the heartache and the body disfigurement. And literally it broke my heart, man. It just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's the lie of what we're talking about is like, hey, if you'll just embrace it and go for it, Praise God, you'll flourish. And I'm just saying, you won't.
Yeah.
You are going to miss out on what God has for you, because true flourishing is about you living in accordance with your nature. So think about it like this. Brad and I were talking about fishing earlier, okay? So this would be a great illustration.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a fish out of water, is it free? I mean, in a sense, you could say, oh, it's free of the water.
Mm-hmm.
But is the fish truly free?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we would say no. The fish out of water isn't free because it cannot flourish on land. It will flounder and die on land, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because the fish was made for the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the fish is free and it flourishes when it lives according to its nature.
Mm-hmm.
And as human beings, the same is true, okay?
Yeah.
You're not free when you oppose your nature.
Mm-hmm.
You don't flourish when you try to live in contradiction to God's creation, all right?
Yeah.
You're free and you flourish when you live as the person God intended you to be. And so if you follow through with this, in the end, you're going to hurt yourself. And then finally, I'll say this. I think the lie of society, going back to the question, what does it matter if it doesn't hurt anybody?
Sure.
It does hurt other people.
Mm-hmm.
It does. And this is where, as people, we have to get our heads out of the sand, and we have to use common sense and logic, and we have to stop pretending that it doesn't, because it does. And we're seeing this in our society today. Right now, before our very eyes, women's rights that have been fought for many, many years are being undone.
Mm-hmm.
And as a father of girls, when you ask a guy like me, why do you care? Because I have daughters, and this impacts them. And I want my daughters to live in a world where their rights aren't taken away by biological men who are trying to live as something that they're not. And so if you look at things like bathrooms, it's becoming problematic. You know, it's like, I just read a story recently about Planet Fitness and their bathroom policy, and you can use the bathroom of your preferred gender identity. And a woman was kicked out of the gym. Like, her membership was revoked and canceled because of a post she made about a biological man shaving his face in the woman's locker room because he claimed to be a woman. And the woman was like, I'm not comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. And you have this gym putting out a statement, we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't care. You just got to get over it, you know?
Yeah.
You see it with women's sports, where you have biological men competing in women's sports and setting records and winning awards and winning trophies. And you've got women who have competed their entire lives, trained their entire lives to compete at the highest levels of women's sports. And now they have opportunities being taken from them by biological men who have given into this way of thinking. And so, again, the reality is, at the end of the day, it does hurt other people.
Yeah.
The rights of other people are infringed upon. Certain liberties are taken away. And again, as a society, we have to wake up to that, and we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah. And so much of even the conversation and some of the things you said, in what we have heard from people who are wrestling with this and struggling with, feeling like what's on the inside doesn't match what's on the outside.
Yeah.
They almost feel like prisoners of their own bodies is some of the language that you'll hear.
Correct.
But a lot of it is so much based off of feelings, like I feel this way.
Yep.
And we would never say feelings are not a thing that God gave. God gave us feelings, but they also have a place, and they have a function, and they're not Lord over all. Like they don't dictate everything, because we can feel all kinds of things. I can feel one way one day and feel different another day. It doesn't necessarily mean that feeling is always the truth.
Correct.
And it also kind of brings into question, like, the person you see in the mirror, are they 100% trustworthy? Like, can you trust them to make decisions about who you are physically when you were made a particular way, and who made you originally in a particular way? So it really does come back to a lot of the things we've said in the very beginning from Genesis 1. But when you start to have the conversation about feelings, and let's just say you're talking to somebody who's wrestling with this. Like, how do you help them navigate the feelings aspect of this and the temptation and the, like what this doesn't match up, how I feel versus how I look or how I am. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. And I would say, to your point, Brad, again, feelings, positive on the one hand, the danger is they can lie to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of our sinful natures
Mm-hmm.
that we are born into the world as broken people with disordered desires. And so our feelings can lie to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that sin, it's like a disease, that it infects and affects all of life.
Yeah.
That sin not only corrupts feelings, but it also breaks bodies, that it can impact minds. And so when you think about something like gender dysphoria, we would say as Christians, this is a result of the fall, what we see in Genesis 3.
Yeah.
That those feelings that, man, I just want to say the person struggling, man, I'm sorry, I can't imagine what it's like to feel like that. And I just want to validate the fact that your feelings may be real to you.
Mm-hmm.
You may truly feel that way. And I am sorry, and it breaks my heart. Like, I cannot imagine what it must feel like to go, I'm trapped in the wrong body.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what I would say is what you cannot do is trust in a feeling
Mm-hmm.
that is the result of brokenness brought on by sin in your life and in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We all feel certain ways that completely contradict our nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Brad, I mean, you and I feel certain things at times that try to draw us away from who God created us to be.
Yeah.
And we all have to make decisions on a daily basis. Do I give into those feelings, or do I put them to death?
Mm-hmm.
Do I live according to my nature, or do I not?
Mm-hmm.
Do I conform, or do I contradict?
Yeah.
And so to the person struggling, I would just go, you got to understand. And me too. All right. So I'm raising my hand with you. You're a broken person.
Yeah.
With a sin nature,
Yep.
with disordered desires, and your feelings and emotions have been impacted. And at times that can even have an impact on mental health and mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
You've just got to have this awareness about yourself. Okay. I would also say to the person, there is a better way than the one being sold to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really do feel like this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you, there's a better way. Like, you can't buy into this belief that if you indulge those disordered desires, that somehow they will lead to life.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, they're going to lead to death.
Yeah.
And they're going to make life harder than it already is. And,
Yeah.
and it will not bring about the joy and satisfaction that you're longing for.
Yeah.
And again, I just beg people, like, don't damage your body, and don't take the hormones, and don't have, like, my gosh, you're going to do irreparable damage to yourself and not find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And the thought of that breaks my heart for a person. And so I would just say again, there's a better way being sold to you.
Yep.
And the better way is the way of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that the best thing you can do with your life is to repent of sin and turn in faith to Jesus and to follow him and to bring your life under the authority of God and to do life his way and to do life alongside of his people, his family called the church. And that again is where I would say finally to this person, if our church can serve you and love you and help you, we want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not here to condemn. Like, we want to come alongside, man.
Yeah.
And we want to invest and help any way we can.
Yep.
And so if these are issues that you are struggling with and you're just looking for somebody to talk to, or you need more advice or counsel, then we can give you on an hour-long podcast. Please, please, please send us a message, send us an email, reach out to us on one of our social channels, and one of our pastors will get with you and we'll see what we can do. Okay.
Yeah. 100%. And so thankful to be able to have just these conversations. I mean, I know they're heavy and they're hard. And I know, anybody who's wrestling with any of these particular topics and situations, it's just difficult, man.
It is.
But it doesn't do anyone any favors for us to not talk about it and for us to not be honest about it and not talk about what God says about it, because we really do believe it leads to life.
Yep.
We really do believe it leads to what he's made us for.
That's right.
Which is to experience him and to experience truly what he made us for, and not be shackled by all these other things that have so much been distorted and messed up by sin. So thankful that you're having the conversation, man, and leading us through the series.
Grateful to do it.
Can't wait to see how God continues to use it. And so we'll pause the conversation, at least for this week here. And so thankful that you joined us. And as you go, just know that we love you. We're here for you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Pursuit with James Griffin. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an episode. If you have questions about the message, the scriptures, or faith in general, you can send them to us by texting the word question to the number 22722. For more information about our church or this podcast, please visit crosspointcity.com or follow us online at Crosspoint City. If you found value in this podcast, we would love it if you took time to like it and share it with a friend. Doing that will help more people know and follow Jesus. And finally, we want to invite you to join us each week for one of our gatherings in person or live on YouTube. We hope to see you soon.